This event has been curated around the findings of the latest retail innovation reports by the researchers at the Business Intelligence Service (PSFK). Visit psfk.com to learn how you can download this report with a subscription to PSFK IQ, a library of 400 innovation reports and 150,000 supporting examples and data points. PSFK IQ, where innovators turn for research.
Hello everybody, welcome to Retail Innovation Week. I'm excited to start a new session for this week of talks and discussions around key topics that are driving the future of retail. In today's session, we're going to have a research presentation, and then we're going to have an expert panel discussion. So we're going to start off with a presentation by my colleagues at PSFK, and the retail intelligence team there are going to take us through a piece of research which is going to provide a kind of context and framework to the discussion today.
Hello, good afternoon or good morning to you all, wherever you are joining us. My name is Scott Latchett. I am the President of Research and Strategy at PSFK. I am joined by my colleague and right-hand person, Lauren Lyons, who is a senior strategist on the team. She will be joining in to help me present a snapshot of this piece of research related to what we're calling next-gen e-commerce. Within the context of this, we're going to be looking at sort of the new ways that brands and retailers are connecting with their audiences through new digital platforms. Obviously, we will talk about social, we will talk about virtual and gaming and the sort of features and experiences that connect with those platforms as well. Just to give you a sense, PSFK produces what we call Chatter Researcher reports, one a week. We include trends, we include examples of innovation, we include stats and quotes as context. This is part of a recent piece of research. So we will be giving you a snapshot of that. And then at the end, if you're interested in perhaps becoming a member, I will connect you to the appropriate folks. But let's dive in. So obviously digital commerce has gone through some rapid growth over the past 2 years, let's say. Lots of stats saying that it accelerated in 10 years of growth over the course of 1 to 2 years. We're now seeing it sort of sit at roughly kind of 15 to 20% of total retail spend. Obviously, at its height, it was somewhere more in the 30s, but it is a very important aspect of the way people are shopping today, whether it's where people are getting their inspiration or ultimately making an end purchase. What we're seeing is that the digital marketplace is a lot more distributed now, not necessarily just happening on a .com, but happening on social media, happening on all sorts of different channels and platforms. Mobile also plays a role within the context of this. Lots of new ways for brands and retailers to connect with their consumers. Lots of experimentation to happen within this space. The hallmarks of digital are the fact that it's easy, it's convenient, it's personalized, and those things will continue to hold true. How that continues to grow will obviously change. I think traditionally we've seen that digital has been very good at transactional, but particularly as things start to open up, we keep saying that they're opening up in a sort of offline context. There's now a need for digital to compete on experience as well. So we've seen things like social shopping features, new membership models, all sorts of new technologies kind of playing a role. And we'll dive into that and look at the ways that that's connecting with consumers across the various points of their shopping journey. So I think just a couple telling quotes and stats to kind of paint the picture here. Lots more competition, lots more sort of digital ways to attract consumers' attention, both within retail and beyond. And this really just sort of speaks more to that point of the fact that there's just so many more options available for consumers to connect with brands, to purchase products. we've got social media, we have live, we've got this desire for that sort of one-click aspect of things. And so that ups the game and necessity for companies to be thinking about how they utilize these tools in the best possible way. As mentioned, mobile is playing an increasingly important role, perhaps more specifically as a bridge between on and offline, but also as a purchase path in and of itself. We see particularly with young consumers, high percentage of sort of consumers that are shopping on their mobile devices specifically. In a lot of emerging economies, what we've seen is this is the primary means through which consumers are accessing the internet. And so that is their way into e-commerce as well. So important to consider that alongside the broader digital commerce marketplace. And then social, of course, plays a huge role here. More and more, this is the way that consumers are discovering products, how they are hearing about products, where they're going to get recommendations either through people that they directly know or influencers that they follow. Particularly for younger consumers, they don't really make a distinction between friends and influencers. They're all kind of the same. More and more, we're seeing these channels implementing various kind of commerce aspects so that you can directly buy within the context of that. As a result, huge growth in terms of money that will be earned within these platforms and taking a larger percentage of total e-commerce spend moving forward. For the balance of the presentation, we are going to look at these 8 trends. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these are some of the interesting things that we've seen surface within the context of our recent research. For each of these trends, I will talk through what we're kind of seeing, and then Lauren will highlight an example of something that we find interesting in terms of how this is coming to light in the marketplace. So without further ado, let's talk about influencer storefronts. Obviously, the idea of influencers has been around for a while. I think there's a lot of interesting changes that are taking place. Number one, audiences or users of social media platforms with audiences of all sizes are now being treated as influencers. There are new tools that are available for these folks to not only speak to, but begin to sell to and benefit from the relationships that they have with their audiences. We're seeing standalone platforms that are sort of creating storefronts for influencers to be curating products from a bunch of different brands and sort of sell those through affiliate links, if you will. And then in equal measure, we're seeing different brands begin to cultivate influencers specific to their own brands and give them the tools to sell on their behalf. Different ways of monetization within the context of this, but very interesting to see the role that this will play in moving from recommendation directly into sales moving forward.
And so here we want to call out Klarna, and to really support its multiple retail partners, this buy now, pay later commerce app has been making a lot of acquisitions, one of which is called April and is now being called the Klarna Influencer Management Program. And it's working to connect retailers that are available through Klarna to relevant content creators. So they have access, retailers that work with Klarna are going to have access to up to or more than, I think it was 500,000 global creators who are searchable for those retailers based on all sorts of criteria like category, interest, channel, their followers, typical posts, and what more. And so the management program not only connects retailers to these creators, but also offers commission to the creators as well. So creators can request specific products to provide a more curated offering on what they are helping to promote, but they're also able to collaborate with the retailers that they represent, coordinate with them all through direct messaging within that Klarna Influencer Management Program. And so for retailers here, another cool part is just that they're able to see traffic, sales, and a lot of other KPIs all within that program as well.
Yeah, I think this is super interesting. Anytime you're talking about influencers, there's always the question around how much sort of traffic or that's okay. How much traffic and or sort of sales is this generating? Having that sort of those tools all built into the platform is really interesting. I like the idea here of being able to consider expertise or relevance around certain categories so that you're getting the most bang for your buck, so to speak. And then I think we'll see this kind of full circle with the last trend here, but payment platforms are becoming more and more ecosystems in and of themselves in terms of thinking about the various services that they can kind of layer in. In this case, this is more sort of top of funnel, trying to generate sales, but then as we'll see sort of later on, sort of other platforms are looking at ways of sort of post-purchase and loyalty and things of that nature as well. Content media are more and more important within the commerce space. This is, a primary thing that people are using to spend their time online, just generally speaking. Streaming media, video in particular, are ways that people are, entertaining themselves, but also as a platform for discovery as well. Lots of interesting ways that content is now not just that initial sort of point of inspiration, but now is turned into a sales platform in and of itself. Lots of different ways that both brands and platforms are experimenting with this as a way to announce new products, think about exclusive product drops, again, bring influencers to bear within the context of these conversations, and ultimately sort of shrink the distance between discovery and purchase ultimately.
Yeah, so pretty cool example here from Beta, who's an innovative retailer with Beta TV. And so this is programming that combines pre-recorded content as well as live shopping segments and demonstrations. And during these live segments, viewers are able to both interact with hosts and receive these exclusive on-air giveaways that can be collected or redeemed in store. And so that's kind of driving this hybrid shopping experience that encourages greater engagement offline as well as online. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like this sort of notion of, again, I mean, it's hard to talk about digital or physical in a vacuum nowadays. The sort of behaviors of consumers are so sort of intricately linked, and they're using the platforms that make the most sense. But when you're talking about something like what Beta is doing, they have the store footprint, creating these sort of opportunities to encourage people to come into the store, but also as a standalone, using content just as a way to not only generate excitement, but serve as sort of shopping moments in and of themselves. I think, particularly as we look more at what's happening across not just .coms, but social media, the use of content as a way to get people excited, generate education, entertainment, confidence, and then ultimately complete that purchase will continue to be important. And then I guess the final piece I would say is, again, thinking about retail media across .coms, the Amazons, the Walmarts, the Targets of the world, but then also thinking about how media plays a role in store. And then if you can close the loop in terms of how you are personalizing that experience for consumers as well, super powerful, in and of itself. But if you are a sort of multi-brand retailer, there's a lot of value in that too. So alongside that shopping, that social shopping piece, certainly is the fact that there are aspects of it which are shared, shareable, bringing the sort of element of what would traditionally happen within a store where you are shopping with friends or getting expert advice from someone and bringing that to life within the context of a digital platform. Obviously, there's a lot of benefits to this. You've got multiple audiences that you're potentially reaching. You're giving consumers more confidence in the context of the purchases that they might be making. You're enabling this to perhaps be broadcast more sort of broadly and amplified on social media platforms as well. And then there's just the sort of enjoyment factor that this brings to life too.
And so here we're highlighting the makeup brand Charlotte Tilbury and its new Shop with Friends feature. And this is really adding a social element to their e-commerce experience that can occur in real time. So while shopping within its VR-based online store, consumers can now meet with their friends for a more social online shopping experience. And so Shop with Friends, the feature allows up to 4 people right now to join a video chat as they're browsing products. Lets them ask their friends for their opinions, get that buy-in, make selections, and then finally check out.
I got nervous for a moment because I saw those faces on the image, and I was like, who are these people that are Zoom bombing our presentation? But I quickly recovered from that. So,
sorry for the scare.
Yeah, needless to say, I mean, I think live in this context where you're talking about bringing people together, again, whether it is friends or if it's experts, I think it's quite interesting to think about this from the standpoint of one-to-one or one-to-many. And there's a lot of interesting ways that we've seen this kind of play out. And I'm not personally that bullish on the VR aspect of things, but I do think the sort of co-shopping experience is quite interesting. And, we know people are already sort of like consumers are using their own tools to kind of get around this. And so to make that integrated into whatever experience you're offering, I think makes a lot of sense here. So the idea of immersion is something that's quite interesting. Again, I think if you rewind to a couple months back, end of 2021, it seemingly was the metaverse was all people were talking about. I think that continues on. It's a new sort of frontier. There's a lot of experimentation that's happening. We know that gaming continues to be very popular, particularly with younger demographics. Here, we're starting to see various ways that brands are experimenting with these new platforms, the Robloxes of the world. Obviously, Meta, which used to be Facebook, is putting a lot of, all of its chips into this sort of metaverse space, thinking about it being the place where people are going to do all of their activities, working, socializing, shopping, etc. And so it's natural that commerce is, one big aspect of this. I think it's still being determined about what the platforms are that may or may not win, how this all looks, but the experimentation I think is important here and something that we wanted to highlight.
Yeah, and so here we're looking at Sayalo's in-game purchasing platform called GCom, and it's combining gaming, commerce, and eventually the metaverse as well. And so using the platform, brands and retailers will be able to integrate shoppable ads into these virtual landscapes and experiences, mainly in gaming right now, and can power one-click purchases of both virtual or real products. And so as a product demo, GCom places you as a driver within a video game as you make your way down an in-game highway. Billboards pass you by featuring various ads. When you complete a level, there's an option to interact with the ad brand or the brand directly within that game, complete your purchase, enter your shipping info, and then go ahead and start the next level without ever having to leave the game. And then in the future, Sayalo is looking to provide the same experience within more of like the metaverse setting for brands who may not want to go all into designing perhaps their own metaverse world, but want to engage with consumers this way in these virtual spaces.
Yeah, again, I think it's, interesting to see payments playing a role here, particularly as we have all these new digital platforms, again, whether it's, something more traditional like social media. Hard to say that's traditional, but I guess it is at this point, versus gaming or metaverse. And you have these companies that are trying to create the plumbing for these various platforms to kind of connect them all, give people ways to easily transact within the context of these spaces. And so it opens the door to a lot of interesting, obviously, ways for companies to experiment with reaching their customers, figuring out what is ultimately going to be something that it's going to be engaging and useful for them. But then also thinking about the ease and convenience. Just because we're in a virtual world doesn't necessarily mean that we want friction within the context of that. Same for any other way that we're shopping today. So hard to say who's going to be a winner in this space again, but I think it's interesting to see, again, the experimentation that's happening here. So I think for us, we're always very interested to see how loyalty is shaping and changing within the context of all of the new aspects that are sort of changing within the commerce landscape. We recognize that membership is an interesting evolution, perhaps, of loyalty. It's not necessarily just driven by transactional dollars, starting to think about how people are valuable to brands or retailers based on all of the various activities that they partake in and around that brand. Membership, participation in communities, obviously that spend, things like advocacy as well. But then also, what are the rewards that are being generated as a result of that? What access do you have? What level of exclusivity do you have? What other services or things might you have access to? And so I think the example that we showcase here is quite interesting, again, in light of some of the bigger shifts that are happening within the space.
And so here we're looking at Foot Locker, and to really help its rewards members fight off both bots and secure these like coveted sneaker drops, it's updated its launch reservation system. So rather than a typical drop model, customers sign up for a chance to win, and then they're able to actually choose if they either want to pick up their order from a particular Foot Locker or have their order shipped straight to them. And if they do win, they're able to pay for that product drop either at the store with a valid photo ID. So that's one way they're kind of combating these bots. But then there's also a ship to me option as well, where you auto save all of your information with Foot Locker. And so everyday shoppers are able to also sign up for these drops first via the launch reservation system. But for its rewards members, every time they make a purchase, they're generating points that are able to be redeemed as something called a head start. And that's allowing them to reserve a drop spot ahead of other shoppers and improve their chances to win these exclusive sneaker drops. So in this instance, being a part of that Foot Locker community is actually offering you better access to these limited goods, but then also a greater chance of actually winning them or getting them.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to, and this we will touch on within the context of the next trend, as well as to think about, again, the sort of changing nature of how people are treating some products within the context of the marketplace. Within the sort of drop model, there is a sort of asset-driven kind of investment sort of idea that is fueling the excitement around some of these things because people want to turn around and sell them. Certainly, there are some people that just want to enjoy the product in and of itself, but you have for sought after products, bots that are now jumping in and sort of scooping up all the products ahead of time and then creating a resale marketplace that's out of reach for a lot of consumers. And so tying that to the virtual membership model and thinking about what's actually valuable to your consumers and how you reward them in ways that are going to be relevant, I think is quite fascinating. And to sort of continue that sort of thread, as you know, it's interesting to see how quickly this idea of personal shopping bots has kind of become relevant within the marketplace. Whether or not people sort of are utilizing them in and of themselves, I think again, what we're seeing is that they're at the sort of nascent kind of leading edge of this are people that are programming bots, selling them to others who are interested in buying the latest sneaker drops, and then reselling them. Thinking about the holidays, there was a big demand for the latest and greatest toys, add in supply chain challenges and the like. And suddenly you have normal consumers who are looking to bots as the way to get the cool toy for their children or their nephews or nieces. And this is the world that we're sort of moving into. So sort of using that as the backdrop, we can think of, that sort of next iteration of that, which is, our personal shopping bot, which, knows who we are, the preferences that we have as consumers, our price thresholds, things that we might need within our day-to-day lives, all of these different things, and then can go out and sort of shop on our behalf. We're certainly not quite there yet, but it's interesting to consider what this means for not only consumers and how they shop, but how brands actually engage with these consumers and ensure that they're the ones that are the thing that the bot is sort of going after, so to speak.
So here we're looking at Hot Pursuit. So this is a desktop and mobile browser extension that is helping shoppers find deals by automatically searching through its database of 30,000 and counting online retail partners. And it's actually able to source top discounts for them. So the extension is aware when a user is shopping and then automatically sources and searches its own database of online retailers with discounts based on what a user initially searches for. So acting as this autonomous shopping assistant, the extension is able to arm shoppers with the tools to feel confident about they're getting the best purchase possible, and also just kind of putting more control back into the consumer's hands here. But just kind of a cool way we're seeing this come to life.
Yeah, I think this and tools like it are terrifying for companies that are using discounting as their sort of main strategy in terms of acquiring customers. Obviously, once you have platforms like this that are sort of searching out the best possible deals, it's kind of a race to the bottom. And I think all the more important to consider how you differentiate yourself based on things like experience, things like service, in order to generate that kind of brand love. Obviously, there's always going to be people who are going to be price sensitive, but I think there's ways to kind of combat that. But also quite interesting to consider, at some level, how brands might be able to game the system a little bit and sort of show up higher within these search results based on the search criteria and what's ultimately going to be important to these. So, it's still early days, but interesting to see how this could potentially play out. So one of the things that is always interesting and important to consider within the context of digital is obviously fulfillment and delivery, and what that ultimately means in terms of that immediacy and convenience for consumers. As we talk about in our Future of Retail report, there is a real advantage in finding ways to get closer to your consumer. And that can be in terms of proximity. It can be in terms of finding ways to add more value within their lives. But what we're starting to see is the sort of combination of convenience, curation, and sort of rapid delivery all being kind of collapsed into these new marketplaces, which are all about on demand and being able to sort of find the small number of items that might be the most attractive to consumers in a specific radius, if you will, geographic radius, and then finding ways to offer those services at a reasonable price and then get them to their front door in 1 hour. Obviously there's been a rash of 15-minute delivery kind of grocery services that are happening now too. And so really interesting to see where this ultimately goes, again, because at a certain point, I don't know how you get more efficient than 15 minutes, but I'm sure someone's already working on figuring that out as well.
So here we're looking at the online delivery platform DoorDash as it expands its fulfillment offering in select cities across the US and Canada with this new feature called Double Dash. And so how it works is after completing an initial order with DoorDash, a customer is able to add on additional items from maybe a nearby store or restaurant that is working with DoorDash to that existing order at no additional cost for the delivery. And so while this is a limited time trial for them right now, this on-demand delivery model is kind of this space, like Scott was mentioning, that's continuously expanding that definition of convenience for consumers and shortening that time span on delivery. And this idea of just like multiple errands or services at once on behalf of customers is definitely an interesting service solution.
So fear not, you can stay fully ensconced in the metaverse and ensure that all of your needs will be taken care of. You might have to walk to the front door, but we're doing pretty well as a society, I would say here. But again, I think quite interesting understanding what it is that people are interested in a particular geographic radius, figuring out how to optimize that merchandising mix, and then add efficiencies into that kind of delivery model. I think for us, as we sort of look again forward to a moment where perhaps 20 years from now, or whatever that time horizon is, when automated vehicles are sort of driving the streets, perhaps that delivery window is even shorter when the store comes to you, so to speak, in many ways. And then the final piece that we want to talk about here is this universal payments piece. Again, I alluded to this a little bit earlier on when talking about the sort of desire for these payment solution providers to start to create these ecosystems of services, to begin to kind of gather in more tools that make it attractive for people to shop and utilize these platforms. They themselves are doing the curation in many cases for those hyper marketplaces. They're considering ways to add aspects of loyalty alongside of the sort of solutions that they're providing. They're obviously capturing a lot of valuable data about how and what and where people are buying, which creates interesting ways to add personalization, add value, and then also create insights for potential partners that are selling through them as well. Certainly within a marketplace like China, we've seen a platform like WeChat try to become or successfully become in many cases this sort of all-in-one super app. And that same sort of mentality is now kind of expanding into other markets. And what we're sort of highlighting in the example that we showcase is kind of the US and other markets as well.
And so here we're looking at PayPal as it kind of shifts from a digital payment service to this more super app. And so within its new digital wallet and payments feature, they're offering a ton of new tools that are allowing users to do everything from participate in direct deposit, track and pay bills, complete peer-to-peer payments, but then also access something called a shopping hub and even complete crypto exchanges. And so the shopping hub is kind of what I wanted to call out here specifically. PayPal is actually utilizing Honey, which it recently acquired, which is a browser extension that surfaces the best deals across featured brands and retailers. And so now PayPal users are able to access those deals within the shopping hub and complete purchases within the digital wallet. And so customers are also able to participate in a loyalty program where they're going to be able to earn cash back and shopping credit through PayPal on their purchases. And then a cool part of this as well, coming from the PayPal team, is that they're incorporating AI and machine learning into this as well to better understand, what kind of shopping deals users are gravitating to or are most interesting, and then also improve like the personalized offers they're sending through as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that sort of like ecosystem piece is so interesting. And once you can kind of connect behaviors and intent with what people are actually purchasing, it becomes quite powerful. So thank you, Lauren, and thank you to the audience for listening in. Again, this is a snapshot of what we as PSFK call a Chatter Researcher Report. These are reports that we're producing one a week. These are exclusively for our members. We would love to have you as a member. If you're interested in learning more, please reach out to our colleague, Jeff Weiner, jeff.weiner@psfk.com. Excited to continue this conversation in the chat during the upcoming panels, and would love to hear your thoughts. So thank you, everybody.
This event has been curated around the findings of the latest retail innovation reports by the researchers at the Business Intelligence Service PSFK. Visit psfk.com to learn how you can download this report with a subscription to PSFK IQ, a library of 400 innovation reports and 150,000 supporting examples and data points. PSFK IQ, where innovators turn for research.
I think you'd agree that was an insightful presentation, and that gave us some great ideas, and again gave us that framework in which to think about the topic and think about how we can activate it. Let's now go to the expert panel. Let's take a look first and see who's speaking.
For this session on next generation e-commerce, we have Dustin Kim, who is Chief Revenue Officer at Artsy, where she oversees Artsy's marketplace partners business, which encompasses galleries, art fairs, auction houses, and institutions. We also have Albert Saniger, who is founder and CEO of Nate, the first and only AI-powered universal shopping solution. Also joining us is Rachel Tipograph, the founder and CEO of Micmac, an enterprise marketing e-commerce platform that helps brands better understand consumers. Ryan Jung-Roy is VP of Strategy at Adore Me, where he helps drive the DTC women's wear brand into new categories. Satellite Brands and Sustainability Initiatives. Kim Gallagher is Director of Marketing and Customer Success at Urban's subscription rental business Newly. And finally, David Moran is Senior Director of Retail and Client Strategy at leading post-purchase experience platform Nava. If you're watching live, a number of the speakers will be engaging with the audience using the interactive chat, ask questions and make comments throughout the event. Now, let's join the moderator Scott Latchup from PSFK to start this session.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today, those in the audience, as well as all of our amazing panelists. Albert, Dustin, Rachel, Ron, John, Kim, and David, thank you for taking the time to speak with us about all things e-commerce. Excited to kind of hear where all of your heads are at in terms of what's been happening in the market, where we're going to be heading in 2022 and beyond. So maybe to kind of set the table for that conversation, we can kind of look backward before we look forward, and just kind of think about some of the big shifts that have happened within digital commerce over the past 6 to 12 months. And maybe Albert, you can kind of start us off and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. So there's 3 things that I've observed in the last year. One of them is that grocery delivery is here to stay. There were some questions at the beginning of the lockdown on whether that category would sort of permanently move to digital payments versus not. I think it's here to stay. The second one is we've seen a return of brick and mortar, not too unexpected given the lockdown restrictions being lifted and Q4 being the largest quarter in e-commerce every year. But I don't consider that to be a fundamental shift. I consider it to be seasonal, and it doesn't change the underlying trends of new generations. And a third one, quite an exciting one, which is that there's the portion of consumer spend that is being allocated to digital assets, such as non-fungible tokens, is increasing beyond what anybody was expecting. And the total size of the pie does not change. Disposable income is there. And so there's a new sort of set of players that are competing for the same e-com dollars.
Amazing. Does anyone have anything that they want to add or build on in terms of what Albert has just kind of started us off here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, totally agree with the sentiment that grocery is here to stay. I think the rise of retail media moving out of retail.com and into upper funnel, also against the backdrop of the changes of iOS 14. I mean, we have some direct-to-consumer brands represented at the table, so I don't want to speak for them because I focus more on mass CPG. But iOS 14 made the traditional ways of doing customer acquisition, which is buying Facebook ads like it's heroin to drive customer acquisition, nearly impossible. And it gave a lot of pause to D2C brands to rethink their omni-channel mass retail strategy, because what does retail.com have? Meaning people like Amazon, Target, Walmart, they have reach and they have qualified shoppers to help drive customer acquisition. And then when you see retail media leave retail.com, meaning walmart.com, and move more upper funnel into an environment like Trade Desk, all of a sudden you can start to see the tides change and really think about the power dynamics that exist within the digital ecosystem.
I see a lot of head nods. Does anyone want to sort of build on or talk about your own experience relative to the retail media piece that Rachel just mentioned?
Yeah, I think as a direct-to-consumer brand, we've definitely seen that traditional model that existed over the past decade of simply acquiring customers on Facebook, bringing customers to your site, having them try to transact, improving your conversion funnel. It's not going to be sustainable going forward. That whole model of just a customer comes, buys, and leaves. And we've thought about this a lot, and we think companies have to change the way customers shop, that trying to innovate more on the actual business models, more around the customer experiences, is going to become much more important than simply trying to acquire new customers. And for us, that actually means we have a model called Elite. It's a try-at-home service. We send you a box between 4 to 8 items. You keep what you want, send the rest back. Demand exploded naturally during the pandemic when people were at home, but we've continued with this model because it's something new and innovative. And we kind of see parallels, especially for traditional retailers, how they incorporate and mix physical and digital retail, or for anyone in the retail space, trying to create new ways to shop and new businesses we think are going to be especially important given the way of acquiring customers on social platforms that worked for the last decade. It's just not going to work that easily going forward.
I love hearing that. So I work at a company called Narvar, and customer experience really is core to our DNA. And we've been founded on the principle that if you can take care of your customers at all stages of the journey, retaining them is much easier. So knowing that acquisition is so expensive, and then also now more challenging, is how do you focus on every step of the post-purchase journey, not just acquisition, not just purchase, but actually what happens after. What I was going to share is, and kind of what I'm most excited about in the industry, is the acceleration of a lot of innovation that's happened over the last 2 years. Specifically, different ways that consumers are getting goods, whether it's grocery delivery. I think what I'm most excited about is curbside pickup, which was super fun for me as a consumer. I tried curbside pickup with like 10 different retailers in the pandemic. I'm not sure, if I'll ever go back in a store. That's a little bit of a euphemism, but the convenience that, Best Buy and Nordstrom and many others have started to provide for me to shop online, have a safe and quick way to get the goods, makes me go back a lot often. So really thinking about how do you build that connected experience to drive loyalty, which leads to long-term growth.
Yeah, I want to sort of double down on that idea of experience within the context of e-commerce specifically, because I think, traditionally, e-commerce has been very transactional in terms of the way that it's added value to the sort of commerce landscape. But obviously, for it to continue this sort of growth and maintain that, let's say 20 to 30%, if it does so, and maybe even grow beyond that, that transactional aspect needs to be added to, I suppose. And so, whether as consumers or as, thinking through the lens of your own solutions or businesses, what are some of the ways you feel that that experience can be amplified within the context of e-com? And maybe Kim, if you have any thoughts to share, that would be great.
Sure. I think the experience can be amplified via community, and I don't think that's necessarily easy for every brand or every company. But I think, as I think specifically to where I work, I mean, we have a subscription business and we've built lifestyle brands. Our customers trust the community, probably more so than they trust our brand. So really, really pushing a community on social, of course, but also customer reviews, having everyone review every product and sharing how it fit, why it did or didn't fit. That's what keeps people coming back and builds confidence and honestly retains our subscribers on the rental side. And I think that's, we're looking to build that same community on our resale side of the business as well.
And Dustin, as you think about it through the context of the sort of art world, and I don't know enough about your consumer base, but I can imagine it's for many it's a new world that they're sort of entering into. What are the ways that you're sort of helping with that confidence or adding a level of expertise or what have you in terms of that experience that you're creating?
Sure. Yeah. For when it comes to purchasing fine art, it's obviously a high consideration purchase. This isn't generally a snap decision. So it is a process of building a relationship with collectors through our platform. And for us, we found that personalization is really key. And that means that your data and your analytics have to be really strong underneath the product itself. So for us, with our existing audience, in order to grow our relationship with them, it's really about unique content, more personalized engagement. We're looking at which artists our users are following, who they're bidding on at auction, who they are inquiring with galleries about, which categories of art and which mediums they're most interested in and engaged with, what price points they're looking at. And then with all of that information, we can make more personalized recommendations. And that really then positions Artsy as not just a platform for buying art, but more of a personal art advisor to somebody who might otherwise be too intimidated to start collecting and too intimidated to kind of, walk into a gallery. So it's really just about both educating our users as well as then creating more personalized recommendations for when they're ready to buy.
Obviously, the sort of idea of social relationships, whether that's at a sort of community level or at a sort of individual level, are very important. And we've already sort of discussed this sort of notion of how digital has become very sort of distributed and disintermediated. It's not necessarily just happening on a .com, but it's kind of happening everywhere. And it might even happen from digital to physical, as we've sort of talked about today. I just want to get back to the sort of role that social media is kind of playing within the marketplace, maybe beyond customer acquisition and into sort of commerce in and of itself, perhaps. But what are the sort of tools or technologies or even the platforms right now that are exciting you all within the context of sort of social media in the broader commerce marketplace? And Rachel, I know this is sort of your bread and butter, so maybe you can jump in first and then we'll let others kind of add in.
Yeah. I'm probably speaking to the obvious, but I want to dig into the why. TikTok is just phenomenal in terms of being a commerce driving channel. And if you think about it again, against the changes of iOS 14, historically, if you really wanted to scale commerce within social, you needed paid. So it was pay to play. And in an environment like TikTok, it's actually brought renewed energy back to organic social as well as influencer-based social, because TikTok inherently has the personalization, the moment you open the app. You don't need to spend dollars to do niche targeting. And to give you an idea, one of our customers is CoverGirl, and this was a press story, so I can talk about it publicly. Literally, 1 out of every 2 people who are seeing CoverGirl on TikTok are buying. That's insane. That's a 50% conversion rate in social. And they've seen a lift across their D2C and their e-retail and their physical retail channels while investing in TikTok as a medium. And they do it from organic, they do it from influencer, and they do it from paid. And the amazing thing that they're also doing in an environment like influencer, which is, even like UGC, it's anyone on TikTok, is when they see something pop, they're then boosting that across the entire CoverGirl ecosystem. And so we're really bullish on TikTok. And to give you an idea, in 2019, TikTok was our 19th most traffic channel at MicMac. I mean, our customers are spending billions of dollars in digital and social, so the data is pretty significant. And then this year, on any given day, it was hovering between the 7th and 8th channel. And it's beating platforms like Pinterest in terms of conversion rates. And if you think about Pinterest, like inherently that place is an environment where you go there with high intent to shop. So we're really bullish on that as a channel.
Anyone else thoughts to sort of build on, or ways that you're sort of thinking about social within the context of your own businesses as well, if you're in the retail side of the house?
I'm actually most excited about Rachel touched on influencers as part of like a sort of non-paid or semi-paid acquisition play, and the promise of social commerce. I'm actually most excited about the long tail of the creator economy. I think there's still a large gap between the macro influencers and then the regular folks like us. And those in between, those nano creators, not only are the most underserved in terms of tools, but they're also the segment that have the potential to outgrow the collective inspiration drive of larger influencers and traditional publishers combined. So I think we'll see more and more tools built for smaller creators, allow them to sort of consolidate their recommendations, track how their content is performing, and just give them a set of tools to build their smaller but highly engaged businesses. One example is the company that I work for and that I founded launched a product a few months ago called 5% Cash that gives all small creators 5% cash every time that someone buys from one of their lists. It allows them to consolidate all their recommendations into a single place, add that list link to TikTok or YouTube or Pinterest or elsewhere, and have it be sort of this intermediary step where they're able to recommend what they want, independent of their brand relationships. And that's just sort of our mini help. But I think there's going to be many more companies looking at this segment and lots of opportunity ahead.
Yeah, I this idea, I feel like it kind of came up a little bit earlier of maybe advocacy and the power that consumers play within the marketplace today, and their ability to sort of, as Rachel mentioned, user-generated content and things of that nature, but when it's a little bit more intentional on the part of brands to kind of cultivate those relationships. I don't know if this is something that you still have ongoing, Ranjan, but I feel like in the past you've done sort of advocacy on behalf of your community, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the sort of thought process there.
Yeah, I was definitely excited to hear about nano creators, because micro influencers, nano creators, whatever term you want to use and whatever exact, it's a huge part of our marketing efforts. So we actually built an in-house platform called Creators. And what happened is we had a lot of interest from micro influencers saying that they wanted to work with us, but the sheer work involved in actually coordinating a campaign with every single individual influencer, it's a lot. It's a huge lift. So we built a self-serve platform called Creators. We actually provide these kind of more generalized campaigns, but allow people to be very, very creative in their own right. We started out just providing gift card rewards, which was interesting because at first you really attracted people who like your brand and love your brand and want to do this work for a gift card specifically and for products. We've expanded that into cash as well. And so, yeah, what we're seeing in 2021, we actually saw a 47% higher engagement rate from our creators platform generated content relative to paid influencer content that we do. So we're really, really excited about the space because, again, in our industry, it's kind of funny because some of our main competitors include Rihanna's brand, Kim Kardashian's brand. So for us, going against mega celebrity is not, we'll never win in that way. So we really, really value grassroots energy, grassroots creativity, and trying to highlight it and push it forward in a meaningful way.
I love that idea of almost creating the platform or the sort of foundation upon which then you're empowering your community to then go out and sort of act on that in their own ways, which I think is really interesting. I'm curious, I mean, this is invariably going to come up, and we've already kind of touched on this in some ways a bit, but kind of building on what we've already discussed, personalization is obviously something that is done quite well within the context of digital, and it takes many forms, whether that's from a recommendation point of view or these kind of one-to-one relationships. And I'm curious to hear from you all where you see kind of personalization headed in, specific to digital commerce. And maybe David, you can kind of talk about it from the perspective of your company and how that sort of relationship building is being used as a way to add personalization to that sort of end-to-end experience.
Definitely. Yeah, I think personalization, from my lens, has always been important from an acquisition play. I think you mentioned like recommendation providers. A lot of what our company does is work with our brands on experience, both in part of the outbound and the inbound. I would say when you say personalization to me, one thing that we think a lot about now is how does personalization extend beyond just purchase? And what we think a lot about is how does personalization extend to returns and return policy as well? With the increase of digital commerce and e-commerce and the acceleration over the past 2 years, we're also seeing a huge uptick in digital returns. So there's a hyper focus today within the world of returns and thinking about how do you now think about your return policy and return offerings as a competitive advantage, and how do you serve your different segments within your customer base in interesting ways. So for example, what we've seen a big trend towards is personalized return policies, either based on maybe tier or VIP status. So really looking at how do you build, again, community or top tier groups, and how do you service them differently? Can you offer maybe different ways to refund? Maybe first refund at first scan for certain types of customers based on their previous spend, based on their category. And again, really thinking about a really tailored and dynamic strategy, not just to acquire, but to service them at every step. I also thinking, again, I mentioned one thing I'm excited about is innovation on the delivery. I'm also really excited about innovation on returns. Things like, having someone come pick up your return, and potentially you want to cover that cost for your VIP customers. Really all to lead towards ultimate convenience and experience, which then completes and kind of continues that purchase cycle.
Yeah, I think that's really great, and obviously gets into that sort of idea of loyalty on the back of that as well, and how you not only understand your consumers, but then are starting to think about different tiers of experience related to that. I wonder, Kim, if you can kind of talk about that through the context of how you're thinking about the business, whether it's through the sort of business models that you're offering, or just in general, how you're approaching those customer relationships.
Yeah, so personalization is obviously something we think about too. We have on the rent side of the business, we have many thousands of styles to choose from at all times. And obviously people are interested, depending on where they are, in different categories. Some of it's not that difficult. I mean, there are problems that a lot of people are solving in terms of, using recommendations algorithms. We have an in-house team building that, but We do have a lot of data. So our customers, they rent 6 items from us a month, and then they give us feedback on those. So that is, I'd say, an advantage that we've been able to take and learn at Newly and apply that across our sister brands, the other brands at Urban Outfitters. The recommendation side is a little bit more straightforward. There are still some problems from a personalization perspective, though, that I think are really hard to solve, like fit. I think that, I don't know, maybe there's new news out there, but I've yet to hear of, a fit vendor provider that will promise a lower return rate. They usually promise a higher conversion rate, which, is not exactly what we're going for. I mean, it's great to get higher conversion, but hopefully you get some satisfied customers as well. What we found and what we've kind of bet on is what I alluded to a little earlier, that customers want to hear fit from other customers more than they want to hear it from the brand. So really pushing on the review element has been, I think determining what are the important problems to solve with data and algorithms has been a focus area. So we haven't really tackled fit, even though it kind of maybe seems like an obvious one to solve. We've decided to let the customers handle that and focus more on other areas like pricing, for example.
But you do raise an interesting point. I think like just speaking from my own personal point of view with respect to reviews and things like fit, it's like, that is something I look to when I'm shopping myself, is to see what others have said. And I think as a brand, being able to put the right questions in place to kind of guide your consumers to answer the right questions for others is an interesting sort of maybe simple thing, but just sort of having that foundation in place for them is quite interesting. I want to get back to you, Dustin. Obviously, you can sort of respond in any context to things that we've touched on already, but I'm curious from your point of view, how you see the sort of notion of live kind of playing a role within the market today. I mean, obviously there is the live stream kind of one-to-many, but then there's also the more kind of personalized or curated one-to-one kind of context that it exists in as well. And I don't know how you're thinking about that from a business or what you're seeing there.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's all about coupling live and online. And this is frankly back to your original question about what's one of the things that we've seen in terms of the shifting of the digital landscape over the last 12 months or so. This combination of live and online have been a big shift for the art world. Art is such a personal experience that it's hard to imagine that there's not a coupling of live and online. Online is a wonderful complement to live. I think the big shift that we've seen is for all of history, the art world was generally known for its opacity, its secrecy, its high friction, and business had to be conducted in person. And now with the rise of online, we've seen from a selling perspective that you can reach a larger audience, and from a buying perspective, people, especially younger buyers, have a preference for online. They want to use online for areas, pre-sale areas like discovery, education, research. And then they may have a live experience where they want to go to an art fair, or they want to go to an art gallery and meet the artist in person or see the work in person. And then we find them circling back to online to actually complete the transaction. And so it's really fascinating to me to see this expectation of a blended experience. And I think that translates to, to retail more broadly. It doesn't have to be art. We could be talking about somebody walking into a store to buy, jewelry, for example, and they're scanning a QR code to learn more, to do research about the market and whether or not this is a fair price point. And then they decide to actually make the purchase, and they pull out their phone again and may prefer to simply purchase right then and there because all of their financial information is online. Or in the case of Artsy, if they purchase it through Artsy, that work automatically shows up in a My Collection tool. And so they can keep track of everything that they own there. And so it's not that online is supplanting live, it's that live and online are kind of beginning to work in sort of perfect harmony.
And I think that's fascinating because anytime you're talking about shopping, it's kind of hard to divorce the sort of offline and online experience in any way. Because they're so, the consumers don't necessarily think in those kind of terms, really. It's just shopping for need or desire or what have you, and then figuring out the best way to kind of make it happen. I'm curious, I mean, we're in sort of 2022 now, and so much of the sort of conversation seemingly at the end of 2021 was around the sort of metaverse and where kind of all this shift was happening with what these immersive worlds might look like, or how the blending further of kind of on and offline happens. I'm just kind of curious from your point of view, does this excite you? If so, what are the things that you feel are compelling, at least maybe in the short term, for this kind of next frontier that is still being kind of defined in some ways, that is the metaverse, if you will? I know, Albert, you talked about kind of digital goods. Maybe you have some thoughts that you can sort of jump off from here.
I think it's still a space in its infancy, and you're going to see a few people making a lot of money and a lot of people losing a lot of money in the next few quarters, maybe even a couple of years, until it becomes clear where the large value drivers are. At Made, we are not doing anything as it relates to the metaverse. So I can't speak very in detail about it, but I can tell you that we are tracking it because our mission is to always be there anytime you want to buy anything online, and allow you to really consolidate all of your shopping identity into a single place. And we've been doing phenomenal with all of the traditional categories for users who decide to sort of switch to Made or consolidate their life with Made. And the open question is, if this becomes a larger and larger chunk of where dollars are going, then we'll have to be there too. But right now, I'm just in pause and observe mode.
Rachel, is this on your radar in any context right now? Are your brand partners sort of turning to you to sort of get your perspective on this as a sort of viable platform, whether it's for, just purely engagement or for sort of commerce down the road?
As a just Rachel typograph, I'm very engaged in Web3. In terms of Micmac for our customers, our customers are built for scale. They're P&G, they're Unilever. Are they thinking about this in terms of innovation and brand engagement? Sure. Are they going to expect it to run their $1 billion P&L? I don't think we're there yet. And so it's kind of that dance. But as a space, I think it's completely fascinating. And obviously it's unregulated right now. And that makes it a great time for entrepreneurs and people who are curious.
I like the excitement that is being generated in the sort of Wild West nature of it that is, reminiscent of things that happened in the recent past, I suppose.
I think most interestingly for commerce, it's in Web3, it's really about like IP and licensing. And so one of my mentors is this woman, Pam Kaufman. She's the president of CBS Viacom Consumer Products. She's won like Toy Person of the Year. And you look to people like that who've built billion-dollar businesses around IP licensing. And I very much think like that's where brands are going to be monetizing themselves in this Web3 world, which is going to make us, all become lawyers in some respect to think about how can our IP translate into that universe.
Yeah, I can actually add from an art world perspective, that is a fascinating angle for us. So there's, NFTs are all the rage these days across so many industries. Well, NFTs are digital art, or depending on your opinion, it can be digital art. But what's fascinating to me about it is actually the underlying contract that they represent, and thinking about the combination of blockchain technology with physical art as well, so that you can actually have a mechanism to effectively track a secondary market. So if an artwork is sold and then sold again, and then sold again, and then sold again, that you can follow that ledger, and that an artist can actually get paid royalties every single time their work is sold because they own that IP. It's a fascinating space.
The contract aspect, and then I think for me, the kind of membership component of maybe what an NFT represents is also quite interesting as well. But I want to turn it over to you all if you have thoughts.
Yeah, I think to jump in and possibly take the other side of this excitement, I'm definitely a bit skeptical, if not, maybe curious would be a more optimistic word, in terms of how does this all play out and where does this all end up? Mainly because kind of this idea that, if we all become lawyers, I worked in finance before, if we all become traders, in every type of interaction we have with the brand, I don't think that's where consumers want to go. I don't think that's in reality. Again, if I buy something, I want that thing, I want to own that, I want to feel that, touch that, use that, rather than simply have the rights to that as an average consumer. So how much of, like right now, when there's money to be made, it's fun. When there's money, when you hear stories about people getting rich, of course, everyone wants to run in and jump in and buy the next piece of digital clothing. And it's actually interesting because I've been very interested in the space of digital clothing for a number of years now, but more from a sustainability aspect, less from a get rich quick / tradable asset aspect. And the entire conversation is completely veered away from how can we have people consume less material goods and more digital goods into who owns what, is it tradable, what's the latest price of a specific asset on exchange. And I do, when you see such a rush of interest go in from every big brand all at once, that's the time I think that whatever will come out of it, I'm very intrigued to see. But I do think, a year from now, 2 years from now, are we going to still be having these conversations? And is everyone and every large brand, will the P&Gs and Unilevers ever actually end up going down this path, or will it just kind of become more of a niche technology? I think I'm very curious to see how that plays out.
I think it's shifting just how people think about, I think it's beyond NFT, right? Like if you think about clothing, and I'm in the secondhand space, like people think of their clothes as assets. Like the younger generation, everything they buy, they are buying it with an understanding of what the future value might be. And it's just a very different way to think about it. But I think that shift has happened really quickly, and I think it accelerated over the pandemic. But yeah, I think it's broader than just the NFT space.
I do think that sort of aspect of consumer as marketplace, if you will, or whatever, the sort of, investor in sort of new assets is quite interesting, and seeing that kind of play out in various ways, I think can, have the potential to change, again, going back to advocates and affiliates and all of these different things, it's quite interesting about what it might mean for the market. So just to kind of close off the conversation, I would love to get final thoughts from you all. If you have a prediction or something that, again, recognizing we have an audience of brands and retailers who are looking to you all for expertise and best practices, one thing that you would sort of advise them to think about in 2022 relative to digital commerce, relative to anything we've spoken about or beyond. I would love to get your thoughts. Can I put you on the spot, David, to start us off? Okay.
Sure, yeah, not to repeat myself, but I think, again, from a Narvar perspective, we're always talking about, and I think it's more important than ever for all the things that we've discussed today, which is just really double down on loyalty as a competitive advantage. We think a lot about e-commerce and post-purchase. We talked a lot here, and then on our side, thinking about connecting the digital and physical worlds, and all of that is an effort to really build the ultimate experience. I mean, we talked about advocacy, and one question I was going to ask is like, how do you actually build those nano advocates? And I think it's through genuineness, through experience. You know, if I think about the brands that I, as a consumer, would consider myself a nano influence on, it's the ones that I think are the best. For me, it's a company called Matches Fashion out of the UK. I think what they do for me every time is consistency and excellent experience. It's 2-day shipping. The box comes beautiful. It's beautifully packaged, selection. And so there's this experience that makes me go back every time. They're my first choice. And so for us to really think about how do you double down on the concept of experience to drive long-term loyalty, whether it's in a better communication and transparency, whether it's in more choice on how you're going to deliver your goods, or how you can make that returns process easier to create like a post-purchase cycle that continues on, especially with all the challenges we know that the brands are facing with acquisition, conversion, and customer profiling.
Dustin, do you have a thought for the audience in closing?
Sure. I agree on post-sale. I was going to piggyback on one of David's comments on that earlier. I think we need to think beyond just the purchase experience and think about everything from, in the case of fine arts, logistics like shipping, insurance, framing, installation. There are a lot of pain points that go beyond just the discovery and kind of acquisition of the asset that you're purchasing. And so the more personalized the post-sale experience and the more kind of white glove options that you have, I think the stickier you can become. And then the last thing I'll add is just brand. I think increasingly, and back to the younger audience point that I made earlier, younger buyers care a lot about how they are spending their money and who they're spending their money with. And so in a world where a lot of things are becoming commoditized and you can find supply, it feels like anywhere and everywhere, focus a lot on what your brand stands for. We've been able to gain a lot of loyal users through our mission of expanding the art market and better serving artists themselves. So brand. My parting comments.
Albert, I'll turn to you next.
So specifically for brands and retailers, I'm going to be quite tactical with my predictions and recommendations for 2022. The first one is allow your customers to buy from their point of inspiration, if available, whether that is a social network or a voice assistant or a movie streaming platform or a self-driving car. Over time, you'll get those choices. There may not be choices, or they may be choices, but if you encounter the choices, hop on that train. And the second, a little bit darker, is beware of your margins. Not just on the acquisition economics, but what's happening on the payment, specifically payment processing costs. Fintech folks that charge you for conversion upside fees, and all these other people that slow and steadily feels like tiny, but they could be, eating a chunk, a piece of your business.
That's fantastic. Tactical is great, and that's when I start to get out of my depth, but I appreciate the insight. Kim, any thoughts that you want to share in closing?
Yeah, I think this is maybe sounds a little bit old school, but don't be sure to invest in a really strong customer insights program. I think it's increasingly important as we lose the ability to measure a lot of marketing, and make sure that as you harness those insights, that it includes your customer service team sharing their direct feedback from the customers as well.
Amazing. And Ranjan, final thought.
Yeah, just to kind of tie a lot of what everyone had said, little bits and pieces of it together, is I think 2022, you really have to do everything well. And I think in the past, a brand could get away, a retailer could get away with having one part of their business that's very strong. But I mean, we watch it regularly, given supply chain disruptions now affecting marketing calendars, given technology infrastructure issues affecting other parts of your business. Everyone really has to try to get every piece of the puzzle down and be strong in what they're doing. And I think, again, what we really are thinking about this in kind of a, there's the past decade and then there's the next 10 years. The past decade, there was a lot of kind of hacks you could do to get through and get ahead. There's a lot because the e-commerce space was such a wild west. The next 10 years is where things are really going to get kind of solidified, where people who run strong businesses are really going to succeed. So I think that's going to be the most important.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you all. I'll let the conversation close there. Appreciate everyone sharing their insights. Albert, Dustin, Rachel, Ranjan, Kim, and David. Fantastic. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you to the audience for listening in today, and good luck in 2022. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think you'd agree that was super exciting. Thanks to everybody for joining. Thank you to the speakers for being part of that. Thanks to the PSFK team for moderating and presenting. And thanks for all the comments made in the forum. And we're excited to have had you here today. And we have new events coming up very soon. And I hope you can join us for those events too. From Piers Fawkes, founder of Retail Innovation Week, I appreciate your time today. Thank you.